In the 30 years we've known each other, whenever I asked you how you were, you've always started talking about your work. And now I decided to bombard you with some concrete questions. Is it all right?
Yes, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay. Looking back on your life, how do you see the relationship between your professional life and between your personal life?
I think I can dissociate. There are reasons often to have, to have difficulties, reasons for anxieties related to our professional life. We also have reasons occasionally to have some degree of anxiety, of problem because of our private life. I always tried to dissociate. He had some reason to worry. Something regarded my professional life. I did all what I could do not to mix that, not to transmit my anxiety among people around me and reverse. I think when we are, as we are, both of us, involved in we might say health, medicine, practitioners, we have to learn to dissociate two aspects of our life.
I heard that you recently visited your newest great grandchild who was just born.
Yes.
Could you tell me a little about how the birth of your own children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren has been influenced by your work?
Yes, it's a long story, because I had my first child in 1958, and my second great-grandchild was born this year. So it's a long story. Interesting story because in different phases of the history of childbirth. My daughter was born in 1958. At that time, I was in the French army. I was in the military hospital in Algeria, in Alger. I was correcting, let's say, a fracture in the hospital. And when I finished, fracture of the ankle of a soldier, when I finished, I had, at that time, it was a telegram telling me that baby was born at 11 o'clock and everything is okay. So it was very special. But at that time, the father away was not such a big fuss. At that time, childbirth was women's business. My wife was with her own mother, and that's all. At that time, we never thought that the baby's father might be there. So it just went to recalling the phase of the history in 1958, not so long ago, but another phase in our history. I had a son born in 1963 in Pithiviers. So that was another matter, because at that time, although I was officially in charge of the surgical unit in the hospital in Pithiviers, in practice, non-officially, I was also in charge of the maternity unit. I don't want to give you details, but during lunchtime, I noticed that every 15 minutes, my wife was saying, I think that the descent of the baby is starting, I feel. But she said that every 15 minutes. That was an important point for me. I said, okay, in this case, I cannot go to the hospital by myself. It was lunchtime. It was, come to the hospital with me. So she came to the hospital with me, And she gave birth within 2 or 3 minutes after her arrival at the hospital. So incredible, simple. She took her baby, and then after time with her baby, she was walking toward her bedroom, but on the way, there was a telephone in the corridor, and she telephoned her mother, her parents, to say, my baby is born on the way. So incredibly simple. I had another child born in London with an English mother, and that was in 1985. So it was already another generation, another context, the big city of London. So I know I want to be fast, but Judy, that's the name of the mother, wanted to give birth at home, although she had, first she was expecting her first baby at the age of 38 and a half. She had multiple sclerosis and high blood pressure. So for all the doctors, she was a high risk mother. However, in spite of all what she heard, she was a medical journalist, so she knew a lot of doctors of handicap. However, she wanted to stay at home to give birth. So we had contacted, I was not registered as a doctor in England at that time. We had contacted 2 friends, midwife, home birth midwife. And suddenly the labor started, I think it was 5:30 in the afternoon. Quickly, immediately, she said, I think you should call the midwife. I said, okay, no time. So I called the midwife, but minimizing the intensity, because I was sure she needed nobody to give birth. So I told the 2 midwives, we are in South London, we were in North London, to say that I minimized. I think the labor is starting. I was sure, but I said, so what they thought, oh yes, the intellectual woman, it would be a long story. We have time for dinner. And then we have the result that 3 hours later, baby was born in the toilet, and the midwives arrived at the same time as the baby. So this is a fast summary, a way to realize that the history of childbirth is going very fast. Just thinking of my own children, it goes from 1958 to 1985, but new phases in the history of childbirth. So I use our question to emphasize what is special to our time is that within half a century, the history of childbirth has been incredibly fast. That's what it is. So thank you for this question. A good way to help people to realize what's happening in terms of history. Easy for me, because I've already been involved in childbirth in 1953 as a medical student with minor responsibilities in the maternity unit of a parish hospital. So I was involved in childbirth 1953. And as you know, a different way, I'm still involved in childbirth in 2021. So I'm in a good position, unique position, to talk about the history of childbirth, how fast is currently the history of childbirth. It's not finished, it's going on in a fast way. We're still expecting new phases. So thank you for this useful question.
If I ask you to list 3 things you are proud of about yourself and 3 things you are not proud of, what would you say?
Oh, no doubt about that. I would say I'm very proud to be probably the first one, that was in 1977, who spoke and who wrote about the initiation of breastfeeding during the hour following birth. For the passed 10,000 of years since the beginning of the socialization of childbirth, domination of nature, an aspect of domination of nature. It was a general rule via beliefs and rituals, one way or another, to delay the initiation of breastfeeding, to give somebody giving care to the baby. You know, it has been like that for thousands of years. And for example, the belief that colostrum is not good for the baby and so on. So I think that if I had just to say in two sentences what I consider important in what I have understood and transmitted during my career, is that I understood that a human being has been programmed to find the breast during the hour following birth. I've observed during the hour following birth what is called in English the rooting reflex. There's a baby trying to find something, baby doing that. That's the rooting reflex. So I was interested in this rooting reflex. I said, that's the time when baby obviously needs the breast, needs the mother, not a good time to separate them. And I understood at the same time that if the mother has given birth by herself, no pharmacology, just by herself, it means that at the very time when baby is born, she's on another planet. She has forgotten the rest of the world. She has reduced the control by the rational, logical brain, what we call, technically speaking, what we call the neocortex, the new brain. She's outside our world. And she knows what to do. When baby is doing that, if the mother is another planet, she knows. So it's an interaction at that time between two pure mammals who have not yet developed the thinking mind, the new cortex, who are not under the control of the thinking brain. They are on another planet. Baby, because it's young, the brain is not yet mature, and mother, because to give birth, had to reduce the control by this new mind, the new cortex. So that's a new understanding of the importance of the very first minute and the first hour in particular of what's happening immediately after birth. So to go back to your question, I think that you have to focus on one point I have understood, and I try to transmit my understanding of this phase. I might say I've understood that human beings originally are programmed to find the breast during the hour following birth. And it's a time when the mother knows what to do as well, if she's on another planet. So I might almost stop here. I would prefer people don't look at too many things. Just that I think it's important.
Thank you. You didn't speak about the other three things you are not proud of. Do you want to speak about this or not?
As a general rule, I don't like to comment on what I have done, what I'll do. We make mistakes, you know, we have positive behavior and so on. And I don't try to judge myself too much. So I prefer not to say too much, just what perhaps I consider as an important aspect of what I have learned, what I've transmitted during my career. I prefer not to deviate to many other topics because I've been interested in so many kinds of topics, you know, that it's very difficult to select, except what I said about the hour following birth.
Thank you. I'm proud of you. I have a question. How do you feel? Is it true that the freedom of a country can be measured by the freedom of birth?
Freedom in general, it's a good question, an important question. I think to try to find some answers to such a question, we can first use what we know about some societies, some human groups that have maintained a Paleolithic style of life, that you say, not dominating nature, no agriculture, no animal husbandry, and so on. Some groups, human groups, could maintain such a lifestyle until the 20th century, at least 3 groups in the world. And when we look at what we can learn from these societies, particularly a study by a linguist, Daniel Everett, who studied the Piraha in Amazonian zone, people who were still in a Paleolithic stage during the 20th century. Interesting point. Then he was a linguist, so it's interesting. There was no word for which means war, fighting between humans, war and so on. No. So, and apparently they were not cruel in general. So that was something we can say. Marjorie Shostak, who wrote about the Kung, South America, Wolfschiffenhofen, who studied groups in the Philippines, still Paleolithic in 20th century. In fact, apparently, there were peaceful people. Not simple, but the point of view of the linguist is interesting. You know, the vocabulary they have. I don't have a word to talk about war. So we can start with that. After that, of course, we can. But it's incredibly difficult, you know, because there are not on this planet many countries that have remained peaceful since the Neolithic revolution, since the domination of nature, since agriculture, since animal husbandry, since the socialization of childbirth. It's difficult to find a country where people have remained peaceful for the past 10,000 years. That's why it's so difficult to answer your question. We would have to compare many countries. It shows that today there are criteria to evaluate at which point we modify the birth process, we interfere, and at the same time, some know about lifestyle. But in general, we might say that today, when we compare different human groups, countries, lifestyles, the common points are much more striking than the differences. Often anthropologists who studied human cultures since the domination of nature, they don't study Paleolithic ages, focus on differences between countries, between human groups. They study the differences, the particularities. But I think we should focus on the common points instead of the differences. That's my way to answer your question. That's difficult to find a place where they have remained peaceful since the Neolithic revolution, since the beginning of domination of nature.
You are always miles ahead of your time. And decades ago, you wrote about the relationship between birth methods and public safety. How do you see this issue now?
First, I want to say something. When you use the term birthing method, it means that we are thinking of a recent age, the new post-Paleolithic age, because when there is a method, it means that the birth process is controlled by the cultural milieu. Method, the word method and the word natural are incompatible. So if there is a method, it means that the birth process is controlled. by the cultural milieu. So that's my first.
Yes.
It's very important to look at the vocabulary, because it's one way we can have some effect, our lifestyle is vocabulary. And interesting, for example, I'm thinking as a book, just cover of a book, of an American guru of so-called natural childbirth. The title of the book was there was the word coaching. And on the cover, you could read about a method of natural childbirth. He's considered a guru of natural childbirth, but he doesn't realize that the word method and the word natural are incompatible. Mm. There is a method. So it's a comment about your question. I use your question to say how important is the vocabulary. If we want to change our way of thinking, what we have to do today, one possible way is to pay attention to the word we use. So your question was, if I understand, about the way to give birth. Method means, in practice, you wanted to say way to give birth, since birth is controlled by the cultural milieu. Before that time, 10,000 years ago, it's not so long ago. Before that time, there was no method. Women just were going to the bush to give birth. There's no method. They're not thinking of what to do and so on. So method appeared recently, but childbirth, an effect of domination of nature. So are there differences between human groups? It's sure that there are places where the cultural interferences are more invasive than elsewhere. I have studied that in the past, in previous books. I don't want to give details, but I found, for example, thinking of places like Sparta in Greece, very aggressive people, warriors, and so on, rituals. It seems that there is a link between the degree of aggressiveness of the perinatal beliefs and rituals and how aggressive people are in such places. So I wrote about that with examples. It's not scientific attitude, it's just looking at examples. So apparently you are right to raise this question. But the way people are born probably has many long-term effects we are not thinking of. I established a relationship, for example, between the rate of cesarean section between countries and the number of babies per woman. Number of babies per woman needs, to some extent, the need to transmit your gene, to transmit love, to transmit your gene. And I found, like, in places like Puerto Rico, skiting rate of C-section, number of babies per woman is 1.05. Not enough to maintain the population, decreasing population. In Taiwan, is roughly the same, 1.06. In mainland China, it's about 1.20. In elsewhere, it's a little more. In France, I talk about France because I'm French, the number of children per woman is still around 1.8. It's below 2. That means that the population will disappear gradually. That's what it means. So there are many links, we have to try to establish between how babies are born and what's happening later on. And some links can be studied. So for the rest is theory, ideas, anecdotes, but we can study, for example, links between rate of cesarean section and number of babies per woman. It's hard data. So as a way to start, we have to focus on hard data.
How do you see the link between the situation of childbirth and peace, freedom and sustainability? Do you see a link?
You know, I think what you are saying now, it's important because you are phrasing a question. Today, whatever the topic, we are in an unprecedented situation. We have to phrase questions. And we have to be careful not to be too fast to provide answers, to be careful with theories, ideas. So I must say that your question is incredibly important, something we need to study, but at the same time, we must not be fast. We are in the age of questions. The important point is that you have phrased an important question. If I come back to Budapest in 10 or 20 years from now, perhaps I can say more.
Thank you. I'm sure you were one of the people who motivated the upcoming Global Congress on Prenatal Sciences, where the topic is prenatal sciences, human Earth connection, and life sustainability. Do you have a message for the Congress?
A general message. I think if I had to transmit a general message, it should be transmitted something simple on a precise topic, but important and not well understood until now. If we're just to say something with a practical consequences in the near future, it will be to let people know that to give birth, a woman needs to release a hormonal cocktail, mixture of hormones, but particularly one, which is called oxytocin. And what people need to know that oxytocin is the shy hormone, the timid hormone, is not accepted to appear among people and particularly among unknown people. So if just we could rediscover that to give birth, a woman needs to release the shy hormone, it will be an important point in the evolution of our society. Thank you for asking me this question.
Thank you for your words and your time, and see you soon. I go there where
Very
you are
soon
now.
we meet.
See you soon. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.